All right, what's going on? Welcome aboard to another episode of the PG Coaching podcast. Today's episode, we got a special guest, big coach from the UK, known as Ryan Sapstead. So really happy to have him on. We've been following each other on socials for a while, and I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to have him on the show. And he's not very active on YouTube. He's more active on socials, like IG, for instance. And that would be a perfect opportunity for him to get some crossover onto YouTube as well. So we're here right now. We got tons of different questions. This is a blitz Q&A style. And we're going to basically have questions about nutrition, questions about training, questions about personal training for the coaches watching out there. And we're just going to have fun with it, man. So I think it's going to be time-stamped. And be sure to follow Ryan on IG right now. I'm going to post it on the screen. And let's just get into it, man. So how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks, man. Yourself?
It's amazing, man. Lovely. Yeah, so basically, like, what got you into lifting? Let me rewind for a second. Oops. I've always been really influenced by the UK lifters as well. Like, I feel like the UK, man, they're really in touch with like the lifting culture, man. I don't know if it's like it comes from Dorian Yates. I know he has a big impact, but there's something about the lifters in the UK. I feel like they just get it, man, and they're just ahead of the curve. And like, tell us about like what got you into lifting first off, and like who are some of your motivations?
Yeah, so I mean, like, lifting for me was an interesting one. I started, over here in the UK. When you go to school, it might be a little bit different over in Canada, but when you go to school, the kind of sports that we get into is football, soccer, rugby and things like that. And I mean, my kind of thing was I went through the stages of football, rugby, kind of like year on year. And as a kid, you kind of expose yourself to all these different sports. And then I kind of went into tennis, oddly enough. And then from there, my love for the gym actually started kind of coming from, I wanted to get better at my tennis. I wanted to develop more power. I wanted to develop more strength and agility around the court. And I just, I started hitting the gym and I got the bug for it. And that was the point where the tennis took a step back. I kind of started getting to the point where I enjoyed the gym side than actually, the reason that I was actually getting better at tennis than I enjoyed the actual sport itself. So we just kind of went from there. And then, the standards develop a little bit of body dysmorphia, and and at the end of the day, you kind of take influence from other people, like you said, the likes of Dorian Yates. And it's crazy, even for a natural guy like myself, we take so much inspiration by the big enhanced guys, and it's because that's where the kind of exposure was always at in our country and stuff. So yeah, and it's only later on that I kind of moved, and you start to get to know the natural side of things, and it's kind of very, very different areas of the sport. But yeah, it's crazy how it all derived from a sport that kind of developed into the strength and conditioning for that sport, and then you just fall in love with the gym.
I see that a lot with like college athletes, people who play football. You call football soccer, right?
Yeah.
Actually, football. Okay, well, like in Canada, we call soccer is like when you're kicking the ball, and football is when you actually have the ball that's, you're throwing it.
Yeah.
But, you see like a lot of football players or even basketball players, and when they're in college, they're playing the sport. But after that, after like the age of like 21, 22, or if they go to university, it's a different story. But generally speaking, once they're outside of school, they feel like they kind of lose that community vibe, where, and a lot of lifters that they were already in the weight room as well. And that's basically what helps them transition into it. And some of them actually don't really even return to their sport. They just go straight to lifting, and they're like, but they've got that introduction from the school.
Yeah, I find it's really interesting because it happens over here a little bit, but not on the extent that it happens with like watching. You see things all over social media of like guys that are like in their teens and stuff. They're like high school, and they're like high school American football players, and they're all lifting in the gym and there's like 20 guys screaming at each other, squatting and stuff like that. Like, we don't really get that over here. It's kind of a little bit of a different scene, but it's really cool to see because, getting people in the gym that young. I mean, if back when I was kind of up and coming and started going to the gym, not many of my friends were into it. We were all into kind of different sports, but the way that they've brought that into high schools, they've started getting the gym involved from like a strength and conditioning standpoint. It brings that community vibe, and I can understand why so many of them they get into the powerlifting element and the strength element more than they actually do the sport often. And because I guess a lot of them know that there's only so far that they can go unless they're really, really promising as an athlete, that, you know, they end up being better at the lifting than they do the actual sport.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think God gives everybody some given talents, you know, and some things you could work on. Don't get me wrong, but there's some stuff people just naturally have, and I think some of these athletes, maybe they were bench warmers, for example, but then the sport, but as far as like the weight room, they're hitting all these PRs and they're just accelerating they're elevating faster at the lifting career than they are the actual sport. And then like, man, why don't I just do the lifting?
Yeah, that's the thing. And like, yeah, a lot of these guys, and it's the same with myself, for example. Like, there was only so far that I would have got as a soccer player, as a rugby player, as a tennis player, and I never thought when it came to like the gym side of things, and even now you kind of have this bit of to an extent you almost have that imposter syndrome where you don't actually realize until you try something, expose yourself to so many different areas, you don't realize how good you are at some things. It's only when you get feedback from other people that are, you know, well established in a certain sport and stuff like that, that you realize that you've got a lot of potential. And a lot of those guys out there have, you know, you've just got to expose yourself to so many different sports, and then eventually we'll find that thing that you've got the talent for.
Yeah, and I think that's important because generally speaking, people tend to like what they're good at, you know? Like I don't see many 6'7" gymnasts, or, you know what I mean? Like gymnasts tend to be a bit more stocky from what I see. Basketball players tend to be a little bit taller, you know what I mean? Like obviously there's exceptions. There'll be that 4'11" basketball player, but like when somebody feels like they're doing well and they could keep up and like even surpass a lot of their peers, it's a very uplifting feeling, you know?
That's it. Yeah, I've got the advantage of kind of in bodybuilding, there's like short, medium, and tall categories. So it's like, it's pretty inclusive, you could say. But it's also pretty fair game as well, because, you know, you're split into categories either based on height or weight, or sometimes both. And it's very even. The likeliness is you'll be up there with people that could be a couple of pounds heavier, a couple of pounds lighter, but in relative terms, it's all about who's got the best physique, who brings, you know, the best muscularity, the best condition, the best overall package, as opposed to, you know, you being up on stage against a guy that's a foot shorter than you, which can be the case. Like if you win your category, you go into an overall, which will be against, you know, if you're the winner of, like, if I'm the winner of the tall category, you'd go up against the winners of the medium, the shorts, and the classic, and, you know, you're then compared to these other guys. But it's, you know, split to be a pretty fair game. So that's what I like about the sport in comparison. You know, there are some people have those physical advantages in a lot of sports, whereas in bodybuilding, it's, you know, it's all about the overall package.
Right. So I was gonna ask this later on, but screw it, man. I'm gonna ask you right now, like. And it's funny because in today's day and age, the second you say I'm natural, it's like people. It's almost like back in the day in like early YouTube fitness, you say you're natural and people will be like rooting for you, like, oh nice, he's natural. But now it's almost like seen as like a toxic thing, like, okay, what do you mean you're natural? Okay, so you're trying to say you're better than the assisted people. It's like, we don't need to know you're natural or not. And it's like people have gotten so sensitive that you can't say anything online anymore, you know? Obviously you're gonna say it anyways, but I feel like when people say if people say how I build big shoulders naturally or how I build X muscle physique naturally, it's like it's almost like you're throwing shade at the other side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's very true. And I think it's quite tough when it comes to, even, for example, if I do a post on socials, it's not very often, like, I'll mention natural bodybuilding if it's a post to do with natural bodybuilding because it's what I compete in, if it's something to do with being drug tested and stuff like that. But, you know, so to an extent, everyone's going to use that kind of clickbait. If I'm natural and I'm a big guy, for example, which I don't believe I am, but I get told I am all the time, so it's just one of those things. But if I do a post and I say, yeah, how to achieve big shoulders naturally, people are going to jump on it, and they're going to be like, well, either you're not natural, or why, if you're stating you're natural, then you're probably not natural. It's a bit of a minefield, really, but it's kind of
right.
It's one of those things where people tend to try and use clickbait just to entice people.
Right.
You know, it's kind of the whole any publicity is good publicity and all of that, but it's because ultimately they want engagement with their posts. And with me, I kind of like to I kind of like to be a bit more low key about the natural thing, because I do find that there are a lot of guys that like to, you know, preach that they are natural when in many cases they may or may not be. But I don't want to be one of those guys. I want to promote natural bodybuilding, but at the same time, I don't want to force it down people's throats like some of these influencers do. I don't force my opinion, because, you know, I have no issue with anyone that wants to go down the enhanced route. If they take they do the research, they take the most educated route possible just to limit those risk factors, then that's fine. But, you know, it's kind of like, this is my lane, and, you know, that's fine. Whatever you want to do, you do it.
Yeah, I'm on the same page, man. Like, I'm not gonna wear a t-shirt that says Natty for life. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need to justify what I'm not taking. But at the same time, I think in today's day and age, it's a lost art, you know. And don't get me wrong, you go to your most commercial gym, especially in Canada, most people are natural. That's true. But at the same time, what we see on socials, the physiques that are being showcased, a lot of them are not. But then again, I'll play devil's advocate, and the longer I've been training for, the more I realized a lot of these guys actually are natural. Maybe my standard is too low. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That 4-plate bencher, he's natural. Like you know what I'm saying? So my standards were low to begin with, and I have no problem saying that. But at the same time, so and you're right also with the fact that you can never be 100% sure. You know what I'm saying? Because you have two twins, and one twin, for example, is working 80 hours a week as opposed to 40. And he's also, I don't know, his family's sick, and like there's all these other factors. Girlfriend broke up, and now it's like they're two completely different worlds, you know? So it's like there's so many factors that come into play of like how much time do they have at their disposal, how serious, how committed are they to the process, and if somebody's really committed to it like 100%, and they're aware of the sacrifices and they're doing it naturally, and they've been doing it for enough time, and they have like a big training age, they're gonna get accusations for sure. So if they have like above average genetics, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
But anyways, like, yeah, back to you. I'm getting kind of caught up. Is that if I find it's a lost art, and I'm sure a lot of people watching, even in the comment section below, like comment, you guys, like go on his page right now and tell me if you think he's natural. But like a lot of your average lifters would be like, nah, he's not natural. It can't be done, no. So, but at the same time, that just proves to people that like, hey, that you're obviously not gonna look like Ryan, but you know, if he did that without drugs, man, it's fucking impressive.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, first of all, I appreciate that. But second, like, I guess it's one of those things. I mean, the fact that I'm quite deep into the sport in comparison to a lot of people. So, you know, a couple of years ago, I think I've been competing for like 4 or 5 years. So when I first competed, I competed with an untested federation. So I was the only natural guy on the stage. There were only about 5 of us in my category, and I won based on the fact that not my size. You know, like I was the lightest guy on stage. The guy that was ahead of me, the guy that came in second was about 10. So let's say he was about 20 pounds, 10 kilos, 22 pounds heavier than me on stage, which is, you know, a completely different look. The only thing that went in my favor was that these guys didn't present a package that met the criteria. The criteria was classic bodybuilding. They were more open bodybuilders. That was it. That's the only reason I won. But then I started going into the natural competitions, and I was shocked to see the standard of the guys, and not just the standard, the size that some of these guys were achieving naturally. And I can step on stage now and I've won shows, and equally so, you know, on the day I just happen to be the best competitor. And I've had other days where I'll place 5th, 6th, dead last in a show. There'll be guys that turn up that are still 10 kilos heavier than me on stage, and they're natural. I mean, it's almost like if you delve so much into a niche that everyone within that crowd. There are guys, so a lot of these guys that show up on stage haven't got social media, or they're not very present. They train in their garages. And if they post an Instagram story once a year, it will be them deadlifting 300 kilos. So what, 650 pounds. And these guys don't exist on social media, and they will come out and they will compete and they will blow everyone away. And that's just how it is. It's almost and the UK, we're quite renowned for a big natural bodybuilding scene, especially in the UK and Europe. A lot of the guys in Central Europe, kind of Austria, Denmark, Norway, and Germany especially, they're huge guys. And when they come over, like, we are good bodybuilders over here in the UK, but when these guys from Central Europe come over, they're again on another level. And it's because there's that passion, and that the sport is even bigger over there than it is over here.
Like, no one really hear from him, and he would just show up to the show and just destroy everybody, and you wouldn't hear from him for like another year. And
that's why they called him the Shadow.
The Shadow, yeah. And his gym, like, grimy, like gym next to the dumpsters, and just
that's it. That's not far from it. It's like an hour from me. I don't think it's open anymore though. It's what was it? The I can't remember what the actual gym's called. But honestly, yeah, crazy place.
There's so many guys I follow on IG who are from the UK, man, who give me like more inspiration than anybody else, man. Like Cuba Sealan.
Yeah.
Big motivation. On the natural side, I really like Adam Powell.
Yeah.
Him. You got great stuff as well. Keefe.
Yeah. Big
These guys are all like killing it, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, these guys, they're all really big, aside from Cuba, obviously, but these, Adam and Keefe, like, they're huge ambassadors for the sport as well. So Cuba's got like, Cuba's very, very known for being kind of like, he's almost the face of Ultraflex gym. So, anyone that trains at that gym, I know a lot of people that move to where that specific, there's about 3 or 4 Ultraflex gyms, but that specific one's in Rotherham. I know a lot of people that travel up there, or they even move there just to be training at that gym because they take it so seriously. So, the area itself is like not a great area to live, but at the same time, that gym is there. And, people will move there because they're online coaches or whatever. The cost of living is pretty cheap, but just to train there and, almost take it more professionally and to kind of take the lifting seriously, as opposed to, I mean, I train at commercial gym, and it's great for me. I'm great with my exercise selection and stuff like that, and it serves its purpose. But to have access to a facility like Ultraflex and some of these other places is incredible. It's just going to level things up even more.
Yeah, like me personally, I don't like it when people say, I'm on both camps, right? I find some people, they downplay how important a gym is, But myself, I say it depends who you're talking to. If you're talking to a coach, for example, who literally trains people, and they want to train themselves, and they want to just put the odds in their favor, in my eyes, especially if you're a natural, nothing's more anabolic than being around 300 kg pullers,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So and it's like you're around those people, and like that gives you hope. They're like, hey, like some of these guys are natural too,
Yeah, that's the thing. And like I always say, if your aim is to get big and strong, if you're the strongest guy at the gym, you're at the wrong gym.
100%.
That's it at the end of the day. And
I would say the same thing sorry to cut you off, for coaches as well. Like, if you think you're a good coach and you're the best coach in your gym, go to a gym where other coaches are like scaling way higher than you and like way more clients, and like have clients for maybe competing or like whatever the case is, and where you're miles behind. That's only going to make you a better coach as well, and just throwing yourself in the fire, So
yeah, I mean, surround yourself with people that you want to, that inspire you, people you want to not necessarily be like, but have similar goals to yourself with regards to, scaling your physique, scaling your business, and just, you don't have to follow in their footsteps exactly, but having someone that has hit a milestone or a marker that you would also like to achieve. Surround yourself with those kinds of people. Don't get me wrong, surrounding yourselves with too many people like that does kind of, if you have a kind of negative mindset, it can go in the opposite direction. But at the same time, I think it's all about learning off each other, isn't it? And exposing yourself to success in any way, shape or form.
Right, but then on the other side of the spectrum, if you're working with, you're talking to like, Bob or Nancy who are doing accounting, and they're just trying to get like lose the gut for the summer, like they may not require that type of environment.
Yeah, and I think that's it's one thing that kind of gets me on the topic of people that are very new to the online training side of things. So, for example, you get a lot of coaches, especially here in the UK, like online training, and I don't know how it is in Canada, but it can't be regulated. Like you don't need, in theory, legally, you don't need a qualification to do so. You could just turn around and say, I'm an online coach. And we get a lot of it over here in the UK. And I think the main mistake with that is that people don't, if someone was to work online with, like you said, someone who's, an accountant, or there's someone that's kind of, let's say, general population, for example, these guys that go on to, they learn a little bit, they train at a gym like Ultraflex, not checking out names, but if they're those kind of people, they're new to the game, they call themselves an online coach, but then they start speaking to the general population like they're professional bodybuilders. They don't know how to speak to the average person, and that's the biggest mistake they make. They come off the back of, even if they've done a qualification, it's it's my favorite thing is have you ever heard of the Dunning Kruger effect?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
So again, it's for those who don't know it, it's basically the principle that you come fresh out of education, you think you know absolutely everything, and then the further you go along, the more experienced you become. You kind of, even though you're at the height of your academic education, the more experience you gain, the more you realize that you actually know nothing again. No. And I think a lot of people come fresh out of education, they try and become coaches, online coaches, but they have no real world experience speaking to clients on the gym floor. They don't know how to explain things in layman's terms. They just go straight into the anatomy, the mechanisms of how things work. And in reality, if you're training general population, like you said, if you're training Barbara that's an accountant, she doesn't want to know the mechanism behind why you're doing something. She wants to know why you're doing something, but what it's going to do and how you do it, not the mechanisms behind why you do it.
100%. It's all, and this is more for the coaches, like a lot of them lose sight of the personal side of the personal training. They get so caught up in the meal plans, the training plans. When it comes time to actually, you got to speak to people in their language. It's like you're at an airport and somebody from a different country is asking you, hey, like, do you know where to go? And he has a completely different accent. He barely speaks English. I'm not going to speak to him like I'm speaking to you.
Yeah.
I might have to use my hands a bit more and talk a bit more, like go there, like. So the same thing with them, like they speak a different language and they don't care about the biomechanics. They just want to lose the stomach, and they just want to, if they're asking questions, 100%, you'll spare the details and you'll tell them. But like, we're not trying to turn these things into a seminar,
That's it. They come to us because we're professionals at the end of the day. So they trust that we know, but they don't want to know. Like, they don't want to know the things behind it. They just want to know, is this doing what I want it to do? Sometimes they will ask why, but we don't need to go into massive detail about it. We don't need to go into the mechanisms behind why we're doing something. We just need to kind of just give them a basic explanation in layman's terms, because ultimately at the end of the day, they just want reassurance that they're doing the correct thing and they're doing it properly.
Right. So let's stay on the topic of like social media and like coaching. Let's get into this clickbait stuff, right? Because the more time I spend in the industry, man, the more I realize that a lot of the coaches who rise to the top, or let me rephrase that, a lot of the fitness influencers who rise to the top, they use a very specific language to, it's clickbait, but clickbait, like they're flirting with lies, like lying is right here and they're right about to lie, but they're still not there yet, but like they're flirting with it. And like oversimplified titles, oversimplified explanations, like really lacking context big time. And sometimes they even do lie, like I've seen coaches lie about, for example, like they'll say like it's like a 90-day transformation. It's like that was not 90 days at all. I could tell. That was more like a year, 2 years. And there's nothing wrong with saying that either, But it's just like sometimes it could be deceptive, and you know what I'm saying? Clickbaity, or like even something just like as simple as just lying about if you're natural or not. Like these are deceiving things, And I feel like the brands that are a bit more honest and like they take more of the slow route, it's a shame, you know. But at the same time, those tend to last a bit longer. But what's
That's
been your
it.
experience with that?
I think, as you said, I think the main point there is that brands that actually take the time to, for one, you've got to know your target audience. For influencers, I think the main thing with them is that they've not really filtered down their target audience. They want absolutely anyone and everyone to engage with their content, for one, because they probably get paid more for the views from any, ads, companies coming to them and paying them for promo. And so they want to appeal to everyone. Secondly, they want to an extent, kind of prey on the weak, prey on the less experienced people, especially the kind of, let's say, the Gen Z, the younger crowd, because they're more moldable. If you tell them things, they're more likely to believe you. They have a little bit less life experience. They're a little bit more naive. If you tell them that they can achieve an unrealistic transformation, they will believe you. And if you say you can do it naturally, they will believe you. But then, aside from the fact that every meme nowadays is about taking gear and all of that. But I think the main thing there is that, they're not targeting, they're targeting different people to who we would target as coaches. Ultimately, as much as we would love to educate everyone, we're not necessarily targeting Gen Z, because we know they're not going to necessarily make very good clients. They're not going to be as likely to listen, because they respect the influencers more. And it's a shame, really, because it's the shame that influencers have such influence, and the more respectable people in the industry have so much less of that influence. And at the end of the day, we've just got to put out content and try and educate people as best we can. But if people want to listen to the influencers, then unfortunately they're going to. And if people want to listen to us, then great. We're kind of the anti-influencers in a way, but it's a really, really tough thing. But like you said, we are going to be the ones that last longer. The whole influencer side is very short-lived, because
Right.
we're the ones that have got clients that work with us for years, as opposed to people that buy a cookie cutter plan from their favorite influencer and they do it for like 3 weeks. And eventually they will realize that it's kind of our job to make them realize that their influencers aren't necessarily as good as they make out they are. So it's a pretty tough one, but it's one thing that I've kind of learned to live with, because you kind of have to accept that there are going to be so many people within the industry that are all at different levels and also have very, very different approaches. And while we don't agree with the influencer style approach, there's always an audience for them. They will always have their trusted following, but that it's up to us to kind of try and educate as many people as possible.
Let me know what you think about this, though, because this has been on my head for months, man. I find that the coaching side, a lot of them tend to be a bit overqualified. Like, they keep taking the courses, they keep training the people, but it's not that they lack confidence, but they're a bit too humble because they're aware of how much more information they need to know. You know what I'm saying? So I wouldn't call it lack of confidence, but they're more on the humble side. A lot of coaches I follow. Whereas a lot of the influencers I tend to see, they tend to be more on the underqualified side, because obviously I'm an influencer overnight. I have a great body. I'm an influencer. That's what they'll say. Well, that's what they'll do. But then they're overconfident on the delivery because they're getting a lot of their validation from, like, okay, well, I got 1 million views on my TikTok. Like, I know my shit. That's what they'll say. They'll have that type of attitude. And an observation I've been making is that, like, we live in a time now where oftentimes it's not really about what the influencer knows. It's more so how they look and their personality. It's like, you're not actually looking at what they're saying. They're just funny, or they really know how to capture attention, or they have really flashy titles or a really flashy delivery. And that's what's really drawing people to them. But no one's really like fact checking them and seeing, like, okay, like, I understand they don't train people because their job is to be more like, get the views in the videos, and which I'm never gonna bash fitness influencers ever, because they have a massive role. And truth be told, a lot of trainers would rather probably be influencers, to be real. Like, they probably make a lot more money than a lot of the coaches too. So, you know what I'm saying? But I find that to summarize what I'm saying, a lot of the influencers, it comes down to personality, I'm noticing. And it's like people aren't really personality and looks. If you have those two things, perfect formula.
100%. And the kind of a lot of that confidence will come from the fact that their looks got them traction. And then they got to a point where they thought, okay, how can I get more traction? They start to talk on videos. They start to get more confident because they get that instant gratification that then kind of just gradually builds over time. And that's what's got them to the place that they're at. Because ultimately, they could have been put as someone with zero personality that just had the looks. And then they've had to develop that personality based on the fact that people's feedback has given them more confidence, which is great because that don't get me wrong, we all want instant gratification. We all want people's feedback that is positive. We all want to feel confident. We all want that gratification, but they've kind of taken it to a height where they've not thought, oh, do you know what? I can really help people. I can further my knowledge. I can start to actually use my influence for positive growth and gain for my followers. I can, they just kind of go, oh, okay, well, what's the easiest route? I'm going to start preaching about this because they put content out that they think is going to get engagement. They don't suddenly think, okay, what's going to get the most, what is the most research-backed thing that I can come out with? It's not sexy, is it? At the end of the day,
how can I make a title that's going to stir the pot the most?
That's it.
How can I bash an exercise and say this exercise is crap because I just stopped doing it last week and it's not in my program right now, and it's just gonna have to get people talking,
That's it. And just on the kind of flip side for that though, I mean, just to throw a bit of a caveat into there, as online coaches, it is our job to an extent to in order to get clients, we do need to tap into certain pain points with our clients. So for example, it's not like, okay, how I achieve big shoulders naturally, as you said earlier, or stuff like that, or kind of clickbaity titles that talk about steroids or not steroids and this, that, and the other. It's kind of, you've still got to use pain points as a way of identifying and filtering out clients. So for example, if we are looking to get lifestyle clients on board that are a little bit self-conscious about the way they look, then you tell a story about how you were at the beach and you felt really self-conscious about taking your shirt off. And we, as coaches, we will always identify people's pain points, and we do have to tap into those slightly, but not to the extent where, we're not fat shaming people. We're not throwing shade in any direction. We're not going to say, I did this naturally, other people are taking loads of steroids. We're not doing that. We have to kind of use those pain points in a very different way in order to help people. And that's just how we get clients at the end of the day. It sounds really kind of pretty savage, in theory, but that's the way we do it. But we don't throw shade in any direction to kind of make people feel bad about themselves in a way that they should buy our products. We tap into pain points like any business would. You can do that from a marketing standpoint in any kind of business, not just talking about people's physiques. You can talk about, a problem. At the end of the day, we are problem solvers. We're going to throw a problem. We're going to identify the problem and show people what that problem is, and then we're going to help them solve it. That's what our business is made from. I think influencers go down the route of, we're going to identify a problem. We're going to claim to fix it, even though we can't. And we're going to tell them that we can fix it in a much quicker time than anyone else. We're going to transform you in 4 weeks. Like, you can gain 10 pounds of muscle, a pound of muscle a week. It's extending the truth to the point that it becomes a lie that is then what makes it toxic.
It's like in the early days of strongman when there's like circus acts and they were trying to sell like circus tickets and they would just exaggerate like the numbers, And like, I'm saying it's like they're stretching it,
Yeah.
Stretching it. They're stretching the titles and they're stretching like it's, but the reality is that oftentimes, like, don't get me wrong, not everybody needs a coach too. Some people can just watch influencers and be fine. But there's some people, I know this for an absolute fact, man. Some people need a coach, man.
Yeah.
They need a mentor, they need a coach, they need somebody to really be on them. And like watching a couple of videos, there's no accountability. That influencer isn't watching out for you because his videos are targeted towards a million other people. So when there's a coach, it's personal. You got calls with them, this and that. you guys are, no pun intended, on the same page on like the whatever software you're using. But that transitions to my next point, and like basically like with this online coaching, and I do online coaching as well, of course. You see a lot of coaches, right? And they'll say, look, DM for coaching. I got custom made training plans, got custom made nutrition plans. I got 24/7 email exchange. But it's like, you see a lot of coaches are given that, you know? And when people ask, what makes your service different from any other online coach? And some of that, to be fair, depends on like, look, if you even like me as a person or not. That's one factor. But another one is just, and I'm answering my question, but I'm asking you yours, but like basically what I would say in those positions is relatability, it's transparency, it's the fact that like I feel like I'm a very relatable guy, you know? And you know, you can check testimonials for yourself, you can see the people I've worked with, whatever the case is. You can watch my free videos to see like, you know, if you really like this guy, whatever the case is, but I'm confident in what I could deliver, and that's what it is. But do you kind of fall in the same camp where it's like you see a lot of coaches offering kind of similar, and even if you offer something different, a next coach could just go on your website and just copy paste those services and deliver in his own way too, you know? So my question to you is like, what makes your service for online coaching different from somebody else?
In reality, it's me. You know, and like you said for yourself, it's that relatability, because at the end of the day, you know, with our social media followings and your YouTube subscribers and stuff like that, the reason that people come to you and they subscribe to you and they view your content and they engage with your content is because they develop a trust in you as a brand. They relate to you and they find that they get on with, you know, they have similar principles to you. And that's at the end of the day, that's why they come to you. They could be coached through the exact same process by someone completely different, even if they had the same workouts, the same nutrition, everything. But if they don't have a certain level of trust in their coach that they've developed over time, just by relating to that coach, getting on with them, having a good relationship with them as a person, they're not going to be as compliant on the plan. They're not going to achieve the same result, because ultimately the level of trust isn't going to be the same as what they put into you, because they come to you because they like you at the end of the day. They believe they have similar ethics. You know, people come to me because they go, look, I want to get in shape and I want to do it naturally, even though I don't like preach the natural side of things. I've got guys that aren't natural. I've got guys on TRT and stuff like that, but they come to me partly because of that. They also come to me because of how I envisage my personality over videos, and that's why we put out video content where we speak as well, because it means we're not robots. People relate to us. They relate to the way we speak. They like the terminology we use. It's not overly complicated. It's, you know, it's ultimately it's you as a brand why people come to you, because you can offer everything under the sun for coaching, and you can guarantee someone else somewhere is probably offering it for the same price, maybe even cheaper, but that's not going to mean that they get a better result with someone else just because they offer the same thing. They're going to get more from you because they know you more, they relate to you more, and they trust you more ultimately.
Agree 100%, man. I'm on board with that too, man. I think that if the coach shows the client the game plan, training plan, nutrition plan, and this is after all the questionnaires, the assessments, everything, when it's all said and done, it's all been filled out, and like, this is the plan. You say, look, are you sure you're able to commit to this? And you just get one more like green light, and they're like, yes. If that client has a shadow or just any trace of doubt, I feel like it's just not going to be effective, man. It's not going to be as effective. But if there's no shadow of doubt and the client's like, man, like, I like the coach I'm working with, he's very credible, and I'm just really riding with his movement, and I think that like I believe in this 100%. I think there's going to be more of a chance that like they're going to follow through with it.
Yeah, that's it. And I think it's just that small element of trust, and as well, if like there is the side of things where they would develop more trust in you if you have empathy towards them, if you've gone through a similar process, if you've put a lot of people through the process and the process that they are looking to go through, either whether it be, competition prep, physique transformation, fat loss, muscle gain, whatever. As long as if you have experience in that process firsthand, you have a level of empathy that many other coaches don't. There are coaches that have ran marathons that are trying to preach muscle, putting muscle on. They're trying to preach bodybuilding and this, that, and the other. But if they've not got the first-hand experience in that side, they're not going to have the same level of empathy that other coaches do. So that's another reason people put that trust into us, because they've followed us for long enough to say, okay, this is why I really resonate with that person. I believe a lot of what they say. I trust it. They're very credible. They get their information from credible sources, and they're experienced. And I think they've got what it takes to help me, because people are already motivated when they come to us. That's the reason that they're willing to invest in us as a coach, because ultimately it's not a cheap investment. It's something that people need to have a real consideration for before investing in us. But the reason they do is because they trust everything about what we do and what we put out there.
Yeah. It's so funny because I was talking to my mentor a while back, not even long ago actually, about he was telling me you could tell so much about a potential client by the way they fill out that questionnaire, man. That tells you a lot. Like if they're giving you just like one word answers, or they're giving you a paragraph, or just the kind of questions they ask, like, hey, when's my cheat meal? And like that's one of the first questions they're asking, or they're just trying to find the cheapest price. It's like that's not your client. You know they're not going to follow through with it.
That's the thing. And I think the first thing is, and we've all got it, and we all continue to get it. If the first thing that someone asks is what your price is, the likeliness of them coming on board is that and even if they go, oh, okay, I just need a rough idea of your price. If you say, look, okay, let's jump on a call, we can go through things properly, and then you can break down absolutely everything that you give for that price, but they're not even willing to jump on a call because that's the only thing that matters to them. They think they're going to get the same thing elsewhere. They're kind of probably messaging 4 or 5 other coaches and saying, what's your price? And they'll get on a call with the cheapest one. And regardless of the fact that they may not, I've had clients that have come to me in the past having not even followed me on social media, and I've been able to onboard them just by jumping on a call with them and going through things properly. And it's the fact that I kind of genuinely care about what they're looking to achieve before going, okay, this is my price, take it or leave it. It's the fact that I think a lot of people they jump into bed with a coach before they've actually got to know them, in a way. And it sounds really bad to say that, but It's a case of you need to take the time. And I always say to people that come to me and inquire, I sometimes even give them a rough idea of what the going rate is on average, what the price is over in the UK. I'm like, look, if you're looking to invest in a coach, this is how much I am, this is what the average is. And my advice to you would be to follow a bunch of people that you think you would get on with and resonate with, follow them for long enough to then have the trust in them to then, I was like, look, if you follow me for a couple of months and then you want to jump on a call, that's cool. That's fine. That's the better way to do it. I'd rather that than then try and, sell you something that essentially you may not have a chance of achieving because you're not willing to put the effort in that needs to be done. Right. So we don't want to set, we're not influencers. We're not selling the dream to people. We're selling realistic achievements, but it's only realistic if they're committed to the process and they're committed to working with you.
100%. So as far as I believe that the input, like I get tons of when you're scrolling on socials and you see ads that pop up, there's sometimes some ads that I'll come across where it's like, look, are you a coach who wants to make 10K a month? This is the course. And a lot of these coaches, they'll be like, look, there's not enough hours in the day to just be running around the gym. And they'll kind of put the online coaching on like a pedestal. And I understand because I do the online coaching too, and I see the power in it, But at the same time, I love being face to face with people, and I know that some people need that type of interaction. So I personally mesh the two because I get the best of both worlds, and I'm a human and I like to be around humans. I don't like to be in front of a screen all day, you know? So I think there's a lot to be said about like in-person coaching. Shouldn't be demonized at all. And a lot of people would rather have the in-person coaching anyways, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's part of the reason that I've still got a couple of in-person clients. I have a lot of people that are hybrids, and then I have some people that are solely online. So, you know,
Right.
it's all dependent on what their needs are. In reality, a lot of my hybrid clients, they like having that face-to-face contact. We can go through their form in a little bit more depth. It actually eliminates the check-in process, because you're checking in with them there and then. You're asking how they are. You've got that time face-to-face with them, and you've got that real contact. Whereas, obviously, the online side of things, it's going to require more check-ins. It's going to be regular. You've got to be checking calendars and things like that. But I have people that are solely one-to-one, because sometimes due to age, I have people that are over 70 years old, and I don't generally train many Gen Pop people, but the ones that I've got that are of that age, they want to build muscle. You know, they're like the ideal client, even though they're in their 70s. They're kind of like, you know, I've got a guy who's 76, and we're still continuing to progressively overload his movements every week, and I love working with him. But you know, try and teach a guy that's 76 how to use an app and a training platform.
No.
It's not going to happen. But all he wants is pushing hard. That's it. Doesn't want any emphasis on nutrition, because again, it's a generational thing. Whereas I think it only applies to a certain type of person. The advantage of online is that I get to work with people in different countries. You know, I've got guys over in the US, I've got guys over in the Middle East. And that's what's great about it, is that I can help people from all over the world in different time zones, which is awesome. Whereas, you know, I still like that face-to-face element with it. I like, you know, because sometimes we're not the most social people being personal trainers. We're kind of like in the gym talking to people all the time, but it doesn't mean we're going out with our friends all the time as well. That is, for me, that's a social element as well. It's nice because you develop a personal relationship with these people more than you do with your online clients. So it all has its purpose, definitely.
What's your thoughts on like opening a gym? You ever think about that? Or do you have a gym? If you don't already have a gym right now?
No, I'm kind of like in a commercial type place at the moment. So, you know, the one-to-ones I do, it's just I'm kind of gradually cutting it down and transitioning to fully online. And whether or not I'll go fully online is a tough one, because I like the one-to-one element. I like having a couple of clients. There are a couple of people I go to their house and things like that. So I like that. But you know, transitioning fully online was always something that it gives you the flexibility to travel to different places, to work from anywhere, to you know, at the end of the day, if I've got people in different time zones, if I want to travel to the Middle East and go to Dubai for a couple of weeks, I've got clients that are in that time zone. It works out well for check-ins and things like that. The idea, like, I think every coach that does a lot of in-person stuff and personal training has had it in their mind at one point or another to open their own gym. And you know, if I were to ever do something like that, it would probably be more from the standpoint of having a place that is my own to film content, to then get more stuff out there. Because you know, filming in commercial gym, you get a camera and a tripod, you're getting in people's way, it's not fair on them, and it doesn't make your content look great either, and stuff like that. So if I were to open up a place, it would be, you know, a small part of it would be to train people one-to-one, but it'd ultimately be to have my own space to create more educational content, you know, more tutorials, more everything, and it makes the process a lot more efficient. But you know, with the cost of everything in the UK right now, it's pretty much impossible to, like, you know, there's no profit in having your own gym unless you're in a kind of commercial franchise and stuff like that, unfortunately.
Yeah, but in that case, if you just want to get content, you could just get close to the gym and just shoot content after, you know, like after hours when it's closed, and just have the gym to yourself. And
that's the thing. And there's no real
need to buy a gym for that, you know.
That's it, exactly. And you know, the fact that I'm, you know, training people at the gym as well, kind of, I can use that to my advantage. I can film content with those clients as well. I can use them for tutorial videos. I can do talk over videos. You know, it's great. And it's just, the only downside of that is that it's not the kind of gym that we want to be at all the time. You know, the place we train at is a 24-hour gym, so there's always someone around. But you know, you've got no control over the lighting, the music and stuff like that. So it's a tough one. I mean, we'd love to have, you know, myself and my partner, we'd love to have our own gym, but we just can't. It's kind of justifying it and finding a facility that is the size that we want, because we wouldn't want to have memberships. We'd want it to be like a really, really good studio. But if it's only for kind of, let's say if it was like 80% filming content, it's not worth it.
I'm on board with you with that as well. Like, I find that, but it could change though. That's the thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's the thing. And it's kind of never say never. Like, even though we kind of write off the idea, we're always going to be looking at real estate, you know, websites and going, oh, okay, well, this has come up. Should we, you know, consider going to look at it? And then you kind of work out the cost and you're like, okay, no, it's still not kind of worth it.
Yeah.
But it's always in your mind. It doesn't matter how successful we would become online, that it's always in your mind to go, wouldn't it be nice to have your own place? You know,
100%.
what you use it for, it's always like, this would be awesome to call this mine. Because when you're online, you can be extremely successful, but you know, it's nice having physical things to show for it as well. It's nice going, this is our gym, this is our equipment, this is our space. We can do whatever we want with it, and we could hire it out. We can have members, we could have trainers that train there. But yeah, ultimately, it's kind of, you know, at this point in time, it's not there, but it's always in the back of our mind. I think every trainer's got the back of their mind. They're like, what if we can start this?
Yeah, like I always say, it's stage, not age. So it's not because, okay, I got to get the big gym, the 20,000 square foot gym before the age of 30, or else I'm screwed. You know, like, it's like, when it comes, it comes. You know, when you're ready for it, you know, when you're ready, and you know what it entails and what goes behind, you know, owning a gym, and if you want to open it alone, or if you want to have like a little team with you. All right, so transitioning more into the training aspect of stuff. So I see you like a lot of high exercise selection from when I view your page. Is there any reason behind that?
I would say like enjoyment of training more than anything. I mean, I'm one of these people, like, I will stick to, I know what works for me. Like, at the end of the day, we have to stick to certain compounds. We have to stick to certain movements for a long enough period of time and progressively overload those in any way we can over time in order to get a result from it. But the thing with me is that I'm all about training. Like, in an ideal world, if I wanted to be optimal, I'd train 5 days a week. Some days I go in 7 because I enjoy it. You know, I alternate my volume. Sometimes I have lower volume days. Sometimes I have higher volume days. I generally lean towards lower volume than I used to. I used to go into the gym and just train for enjoyment for like an hour and a half, and I'd get 30 sets done in a session. Completely, you know, not counterproductive, but it's not as productive as going in and doing 15 working sets, for example. But I just did it because I enjoyed it. It got me to practically the size I am today. So something was working, but you could say on paper it's not optimal. But ultimately, it's enjoyment. I'm in a kind of routine now where I stick to my main compound lifts. 2, sometimes 3 exercises every workout will be exactly the same every workout. I'll progressively overload those, but anything afterwards goes. And one thing I always say to my clients is that, or clients or even followers, is that within your workout, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, and there's no legit statistic, but I would always say the majority of the growth, the majority of the stimulus is coming from those first 2-3 exercises. Those are the ones that are going to make the most difference. They're going to give you the most bang for your buck. Everything else after that is an accessory. It's a polishing exercise. It gives you an opportunity to fatigue and stimulate the muscles that weren't as involved in those other things. But those main compounds are what's going to give you the most out of each workout. So keeping a few the same. I'm the same with my clients. I will program them things, but I'm like, look, if you go to a different gym, and a lot of my clients like to train at different gyms, like we mentioned, Ultraflex and stuff like that. If you go to a different gym, you're going to be like a kid in a candy store. You want to go on as many different bits of equipment that you've never used before in your life. And all my advice to my clients generally is try and get your first couple of compounds done, then do whatever you want. Even if it's bordering junk volume, that's fine. It's a one-off. You're not doing it all the time. get it out of your system, enjoy yourself. Training is all about enjoyment, and I think that's the main thing. I train in a style that I enjoy, but while not neglecting the real elements that are going to help me still get to where I want to be.
Right. To add to that, like there's been some, there's like the optimal crowd, whatever you want to call them, and like, one thing I really love about the barbell lifts, man, is that obviously there's certain bars and you go to different gyms and the plates will be slightly different, but for the most part, man, a front squat's a front squat, So it's like if your front squat is your main, like that's what I'm running in my cycle right now. If I go to any gym, I can do a front squat. If your main lift is a hack squat, what if it's, for example, like an Atlantis hack squat or whatever the case is, like, and then the gym you go to is like, it's the Cybex, for example.
That's it.
Like, it's different. With the front squat, it'll be the same. So it's like you do, as far as the deadlift's concerned, like you do RDL, or like I see from when I'm observing your videos, like you'll still have that heavy medium potato lift. It'll be like some form of barbell deadlift, some form of barbell squat, and then the rest is like a kid at the candy store. It's like you'll play around like a different handle for like a tricep extension, but for the meat and potatoes are there.
That's it. And I find like one major flaw, because I love the optimal crowd, like in the sense of kind of, I love them in a comedic way, because a lot of the stuff that they say, you can throw exercises around that are research based until the cows come home. The issue with what they have, I see guys that are part of the optimal crowd. Every now and again, you see guys come to the gym that have their logbook. They're part of the kind of optimal crowd. They're using D handles, cuffs, like everything. All right. But the one kind of flaw in what they do is that if the piece of equipment they want to use is taken, they'll wait 10 minutes for it.
Yeah.
Because they want to progressively overload that movement, right? So it's almost gone in the opposite direction. It's a complete, it almost makes them slight hypocrites to the whole optimal side of things, because if they're talking optimal, what about optimal rest periods? If you want to do 5 exercises, you have to do the same routine every time. You're waiting for that Cybex overhead press. You're going to be waiting 10, 15 minutes, right? And to the point where they actually, gym etiquette kind of goes out the window as well. You can be part of the optimal crowd, and then your gym etiquette becomes nothing because you're staring at the person waiting for that machine. And it's just not cool. So I find that kind of goes in the opposite direction. They can try and be as optimal as they want, but at the end of the day, you need to consider, and that's part of the reason that I train how I train, is because as much as I'd love to get in a squat rack every time, like I'm quite fortunate. Our gym's got it's got 2 lifting platforms, 3 squat racks. Great. Almost, 90% of the time I can get in a rack, no problem. But after that, I mean, we've only got 1 plate loaded chest press, 1 plate loaded shoulder press, 1 plate loaded leg press, 1 plate loaded hack. The issue is, if you can't get on that, I'm not going to wait for it. I've got a certain amount of, and the same with our clients. We only have a certain amount of time to train, and that's why I promote so much different exercise selection on social media. I promote, exercises that give you a lot of bang for your buck, because a lot of the time they don't require certain pieces of equipment. They don't require, it's minimal equipment. It's more dumbbell variations, barbell variations. There are cool things you can do on machines, but the reason I promote dumbbell, barbell, cable, functional variations as well is because they require less equipment. They're more convenient. The likeliness of you being able to do an exercise in a busy gym is a lot higher. We don't all have the time. We're not training like athletes, because ultimately we're, as bad as it sounds, we're amateur lifters. Even if professionals, we're still amateur lifters. It's not our job to do the lifting. We educate others on how they can do it. And our clients, again, aren't professionals. They've got places to be. They've got things to do. They've got professional careers that they need to be getting back to. They've got a select amount of time that they need to be in the gym for, and it's not often they could stay longer. They can't hang around 10 minutes to be optimal, if that makes sense.
But it's crazy to go deeper down that rabbit hole, man. It gets so much deeper because, okay, I'll give the audience a little disclaimer, like not disclaimer, but a little sneak peek. Like I shot a video yesterday, okay, and it was a 2-for-1. So I was doing the rotate handles.
Yep.
Because the product reviews tend to do well on my channel, so I'm just like, let me guinea pig it and show people what it is. And like I ordered it. some products, some of the companies send me this stuff. Some of them I pay every penny for, and this was one where I paid every penny for the rotate handles along with the multi-grip cable bar. And there's a lot of functions for it. So I'm like, hey, it's you get bang for your buck. But I rated it like a nice 6 out of 10, basically. And one thing I don't want is I don't want people watching my videos saying, okay, that's why my back is not big, because I don't have the rotate handles and I don't have the multi-grip bar. And yeah. I don't want that. Or I don't want people saying, Phil, is the reason why my delts are not big is because I'm not doing cuff laterals? Is that why? Or then, you know, you have to grab the bench, you have to grab the free cable station, you have to get the cuffs, you have to get the cuffs from your bag. Like, it's just like this whole, like, and then, oh, you're shooting 2K, you got the tripod. It's like the setup's taking longer than the actual lift. So it's like, I don't want to be promoting certain lifts, you know, and like, but they do feel good, don't get me wrong. And if you're in an empty gym, you know, go ahead. But some lifts, man, it's like, I used to train at a strongman gym, okay? And the strongman gym it obviously had a lot of strongman implements, but they would tell me like, man, some of these lifts, it's like a workout to get it set up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like bodybuilding in the optimal crowd has become that new thing where it's like, if your gym doesn't have very specific machines, you got to go through like this labyrinth just to get into the lift. So basically what I'm trying to say is that sometimes, man, you've seen Dorian do it, a seated dumbbell lateral. Like, you're getting tons of benefits. You have tons of external stability with that. You're seated, you have glute support, whatever the case is, or even like a high incline chest supported lateral. Like, that's going to take you 10 seconds to set up.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you've got to think about how you can point at research. You can go, okay, we've done, you know, this research dictates that the EMG study they did on this lateral raise variation is better than this. But then at the end of the day, okay, well, you could say that's an optimal exercise, but the setup is so suboptimal and it takes so long that you've eaten into your session. And in actual fact, the benefit of doing that cuff lateral over a dumbbell lateral wasn't actually enough to outweigh the cost that you've wasted so much time setting it up. So a lot of the time, I think optimal stuff's great. If it's really fast, it's really convenient to set up. I see people, people reverse banding leg presses. They'll reverse band a hack squat, or they'll band stuff. They'll use daisy chains and cuffs and all of that. If they've got it down to a T where it takes seconds to set up, fantastic. If they know why they're doing it and they're receiving the benefit, that's awesome. But a lot of the time, unless your clients are like that, they've not got the time to set it up. They don't want to have a gym bag that's full of like thousands of pounds or dollars worth of equipment just to take to the gym to then set up. It's just, that's what makes it, the optimal side is great. There's always something to be had, and research is great to point you in the right direction. But it doesn't take away from the fact that you need your exercise selection to be convenient for you. You need to get the most bang for your buck, and our clients need to get the most bang for their buck when it comes to the time they have, the exercises they have, the equipment they have access to. And there are a lot of 24-hour gyms over here in the UK that are kind of like the equivalent of like Planet Fitness in the US. I don't know whether you have that in Canada and stuff like that. And same with like Crunch Fitness, like I'm at a Snap Fitness. Those kind of gyms, you could go in and it'd be dead, or you could go in and there would be 50 people and people will be queuing up to use equipment. You can't account for going in at a certain time knowing you're going to be able to set up this huge kind of layout to then get your workout done. You are you're no more important than anyone else in that gym. So you don't need to treat it like that. That's what gyms like Ultraflex are great for. And, some of the other kind of private gyms, they're great for that because everyone is like-minded. They've got multiple, different variations of machines. They go for different branded stuff. They've got, multiple of everything. And it suits their audience. But especially people that are training in more kind of commercial environments, the optimal crowd they shouldn't be training in those commercial environments unless they're willing to accept that, you're not always going to have your way.
No, big time. I'm only speaking from this because I was drinking the optimal Kool-Aid in like 2021,
Yeah, I think we
So
have for sure. Like, and to an extent, we always will do. It's just a case of
how
you
deep you are in it.
to like knowing nothing. Then there's the optimal crowd thinking like there is one way to do things, and then you go back. It's like we spoke about the Dunning Kruger effect. You go back and you just go, actually, there's more than one way to do things, and the benefit isn't actually that much better, and it's more convenient. So we're going to opt for convenience 9 times out of 10 because we're going to get more out of it. If that allows us, if saving time on a setup of a piece of equipment allows us more time in the rest of our workout, then arguably that is more optimal than the awkward setup and takedown of all this equipment. So, and like you said, people are reliant upon using the same brand of equipment and the exact same piece every time. You know, what if you're so used to using a plate loaded piece of equipment and it's so busy you've got to use the pin loaded version? Does that screw up your logbook? Or are you just going to wait for the plate loaded like 15-20 minutes? It's a waste of time.
Waste of time. But it's like you have to see these things coming ahead of time, you know?
That's it. If you've got a backup plan, that's great. It's part of the reason I put so many exercises out there is because the majority of the time, any kind of exercise, even if it looks like a little bit of, fuckery in a way, and it looks kind of like a little bit clickbaity and stuff like that, those exercises are served as alternatives. They may look a little bit more sexy for Instagram. They're alternatives to the main compounds. If you can't do a main compound for whatever reason, you don't have access to the machine, they're alternatives and they keep people engaged. They go, oh, that's a nice little variation. I'll see if I can feel it a little bit more than the standard version. If they don't, okay, yeah, it's not really the right thing for me. But that's just why I put so much out there at the end of the day. It's because it's to give people so many options, and it's to kind of add to their training toolbox in a way. It's so they have endless backup plans, because ultimately the way that I program is you need your meat and potato exercises. You absolutely need them, and you need to perform every variation to the best of your ability. But it's often the best variations tend to be the most basic, and it's always those golden exercises are the ones that people have been doing for decades. But those extra ones, the ones that are kind of a little bit more clickbaity, they serve a purpose, but they're just alternatives to the main stuff.
It's like with the optimal crowd, my problem is that some of them, they're trying to not all of them, some of them are trying to outsmart their way to bigger muscles, And I really like another name I like is Forever Hardcore. It's Ant Bales and Leroy Davis,
Yeah.
Super entertaining, man. But there was this quote that Ant Bales always said, man. He might have said it a couple times, but it always rang in my head. He's like, you can't build the thick back cables. He's like, you're not gonna build a slabbed up back with cables. And man, I like cables. I think cables are good. It's a nice tool, but man, the back thickness, man, and oftentimes the one lift people bash the most is the barbell row, man. And the more I've spent time under the bar, whatever the case is, and I tend to realize, man, that all the people I know with the thickest and the widest backs do some form of bent over barbell row, whether it's T-bar or barbell.
That's it. And you've got to
the correctors, and it's just, you can't get that with only doing chest supported stuff, man.
That's it. And with these, I see a lot of these guys out there that kind of it's great. You should always compare the style of training. Now you can compare you get the guys that like the optimal crowd, then you get the guys that go in the opposite direction, that go, okay, well, Ronnie did this. Well, Ronnie's in a wheelchair now, unfortunately, and a lot of the stuff that he did worked for him. Don't compare yourself to the likes of Ronnie and Dorian, because they were genetic freaks. The likeliness of you being Mr. Olympia and responding to the same stuff Mr. Olympia did are very, very little. But there's a lesson to be learned on either side. The fact that they did a barbell rowing movement or a hinged rowing movement with no support, that speaks for itself. Then you take the optimal crowd, they do a lot of supported stuff. If you combine the two, then that's great. It's the same with there are certain people within the optimal crowd that say every single person should do a Romanian deadlift. Well, in actual fact, not every person can do a Romanian deadlift. They're, dependent on whether they've got any issues and stuff like that. However, what I would argue is that if every person possible should be able to do a form of hinge. So if you break the movements down, as opposed to going, okay, well, a barbell row variation that is not supported is great. So you can go, okay, bent over row, T-bar row, any variation that's not supported, even just a bent over dumbbell row as opposed to barbell. That's where the purpose is. Then you've got your hinge. You can go, okay, remaining deadlift. If you can't RDL, you can pull from the blocks. If you can't pull from the blocks, you can use a trap bar. You can hinge just using a 45-degree back extension. There's so many ways that you could do things. But I think the main thing is that you take the optimal side of things from a mechanics and a movement standpoint, and you also take the Ronnie did this, Dorian did this, Jay Cutler trained like this. Take each one with a pinch of salt and then come to your own conclusion. You have to find, as we know, you've got to find what's best for you. We have to find what's best for our clients. But there is no, I don't know about in Canada, but in the UK, we say there's no one way to string a cat.
We said at the end
of the day, that's the thing. You've got to find what works for you, and you have to find what works for each individual instead of, we can throw research at everything, but again, research will only take you so far. It gives a really good indicator in what direction we should be leaning towards, but it's not always gospel. 9 times out of 10, you can find your bias within research as well. So it's the same with everything. I think the whole optimal crowd thing, it's great. The idea is there. I just think the thing with coaches in general is that people lean towards the style of training that they enjoy the most, but some people take it too much to an extreme from one side to the other.
Right.
People like ourselves are a little bit more like-minded, and we understand we can take things with a pinch of salt here and there, and we come to our own decision. But there are a lot of people that will take it to such a far extreme that they're completely in denial about the opposite end of the spectrum, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So people really think that they're like such a unique snowflake, like they need a very specific lift. And don't get me wrong, like I was dealing with a lot of like asymmetries, and not just like little light stuff, like stuff where like my squat, like all my lifts, because it wasn't just in one lift, it was showing in all my lifts, looked absolutely terrible. It was like a very specific like lateral pelvic tilt where like, anyways, it was a disaster. And like I had to go through a lot of coaches to fix and to be able to lift somewhat symmetrical now.
Yeah.
With certain lifts, like, weighted Copenhagen's and like lifts that like not too common, and like lateral flexion drills and like stuff to really get it back in place, whatever the case is. So it all comes down to context,
Yeah.
At the same time, even though I was going through these things, I still knew like, man, the goal is to do the big lifts. And I know my body might be put in a certain orientation where the lifts are not looking the way they need to, and the output is not where it needs to be. But at the same time, once I get back into like decent positioning, my eyes are on those lifts, or at least a variation of them with like a specific tempo or pause, but some kind of ballpark of those lifts. And like, because I understand at the end of the day, you can't nerd your way out to bigger muscles. Weight still has to be put on the bar. And the way I see like people ask, for example, hey Phil, X muscle is not big enough. What do I do about it? And I say like, look, man, like look at that muscle in the mirror. Let's say it's your chest. What are you dumbbell benching? And they'll say, for example, 200-pound guy, let's say like he's like 220. Yeah, I'm doing the 75s for a set of 8. It's like, that's not going to cut it, man. If you're trying to buy a house and the guy's saying the down payment is 20 grand and you show up to the bank, I'm like, yeah, I got 8 grand. It's not going to cut it. Like you need to get to the hundreds, you need numbers for all across the body. So it's like people want to say, okay, well, now I'm doing this chest exercise and this new machine that came out, and now it's like they could kind of like hide the strength standards because no one really knows what the standards are for that machine. But it's like the dumbbells are the dumbbells. It's like, do you have the numbers or not? And if you don't have the numbers, you're not gonna have. It's the cold truth, man.
That's it. And like you said, there's a direct correlation between guys that have a big barbell row, a big deadlift or a big hinge or a big squat. There's a direct correlation between
100%. Yeah.
that weight and how big they are. You know, secondary to that weight, you could then take into account that, is their form okay? Is their range of movement okay? But ultimately, if they're able to squat with decent form, X amount of weight, you know, the guy that's going to be able to squat 400 pounds with a decent range of movement is likely to be bigger 9 times out of 10 or more well developed than the guy that can't squat 400 pounds.
Right.
It's gonna, and especially when it comes to it, like from a bodybuilding standpoint, and I know I kind of bringing this back to the stage side of things. If you cut to the point that you are like shredded to the bone, stage ready, those lifts show on stage. Like, you can tell the guy who squats from the guy that doesn't squat. You can tell the guy that hinges from the guy that doesn't hinge, because there are elements of their physique that transfer onto stage. You know, for example, if you said there's a guy that only cable rows or supported rows, stood next to, facing the rear of the stage with their back on show, stood next to a guy that does a bent over barbell row all the time as his main compound, you will see the guy that does a barbell row will have a significantly more developed back, whether it be the upper traps, the erectors, every finer detail shows from based on the way that they train. You could see the guys on stage, like, you could see the difference between the guy that trains in his garage and the guy that trains in a commercial gym, based on the access they have equipment to. Literally just stood side by side, you could tell which is which for the most part, because sometimes, you know, having the luxury of all this extra equipment, you can get paralysis by overanalysis. You just think, yeah, it's like the whole kid in a candy store thing. You're like, oh, okay, what do I use today? But then equally so, the guys that train in the garage don't have that option. They've got their meat and potatoes. They'd be lucky if they've got like a cable machine as an accessory, because they've invested into their garage gym, which is awesome. But they stick to those same compound movements. They progressively overload the shit out of them until they are just strong as anything. And that's what transfers the most when it comes to their physique, than the guys that are like, oh, okay, you know, I use the chest fly machine. Sometimes I use the chest press. Sometimes I'll dumbbell, but then I don't do it every week. I just kind of jump here, there, and everywhere. You got to have those meat and potatoes exercises, haven't you? That, like, because it does show.
Yeah, that's what bothers me about like the fitness, like YouTube fitness, especially, like, or even TikTok, like just fitness in general, is that now there's just so much information that's just like, anyways, I'm not even gonna go down that rabbit hole, but people are always taking the easy way out, and like, long story short, you can't nerd your way out to bigger muscles. You know, it's, at the end of the day, you look in the mirror, it's like, show me the money. Like, what are you dumbbell benching? Do you have it or not? And that's basically what it is, man. But like, let's keep the questions rolling, man. Like,
yeah.
Got a couple more for training, then we'll go nutrition, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about breathing, man. And I feel like this is an aspect that doesn't really get discussed often enough. Because people are like, I'm alive. Obviously, I know how to breathe. Why are you telling me I need to learn how to breathe when I exercise? You know, that's like, I often got like people have that type of attitude when you talk about breathing, or they'll just roll their eyes like, yeah, it's important, but they won't actually like understand that, like, if you got like 400 pounds in your back, like you just said, maybe there is a specific way to breathe to get the most out of it. You know, if you're putting your body in like the optimal, in better positions to have more output, you really think like your nose and like your breathing pattern or the sequence of like when you time your breaths, you really think that doesn't matter? Yeah. And some will make the argument, well, if you're lifting heavy, all that goes out the window anyways, because you're in survival mode and you're just trying to get the weight up. And like, I understand that to a certain, there is some of that to a certain extent, you know, like if you have a very heavy amount of weight, some people are not counting like 5, 4, like they're not tempoing it. They're not counting the tempo in their head. They're trying not to drop. You know what I'm saying? But as far as you, like, I see you put up numbers. So for the audience watching, what's going through Ryan's head when he's like under like a 400 or 500 pound squat?
I think the main thing, I mean, breathing is very, very underrated when it comes to movements like that. Like, if you're a power lifter, you know the importance of breathing. The thing is, for the majority of the people that want to lift big weights and they go to a gym, but they're not they're not powerlifters, but they just want to squat heavy. They want to bench heavy. They want to deadlift heavy. The most underrated part is the breathing. And it's not necessarily, it is obviously how you breathe, when you breathe, but it's also where you're breathing to. So if you take an example of, if you're breathing in, when it comes to, let's say the bench press is going to be different to the squat and the deadlift, in the sense of you want to breathe in and you want to fill your lungs to the point that your chest is sticking out. You want to breathe into your chest. The difference between that and the squat and the deadlift, for example, is that when you inhale, you're actually trying to fill your belly as opposed to filling your chest. You want to create that. So it's, it's almost like a weightlifting belt that you're creating. And if you are wearing a belt, you're creating pressure against that belt that's then got to bring stability around your midsection. So, the breathing itself that's the kind of easy part, when to breathe. It does take a little bit of time for people to grasp when they should breathe. Obviously, you need to prepare, you need to brace, you need to take a deep breath in, control on the way down, and then you either breathe out or hold your breath on the way up, depending on what kind of style you adopt. But the main thing is where you're breathing into. That's what's going to generate stability. That's what's going to almost help you create that stability and create that safety for you to then project and power through the floor with your feet, through, and through the hips and everywhere else. With the bench press, it's slightly different. I think it's a mixture of both. You've got to kind of fill your lungs up and fill your belly up a little bit, depending on where you press from, where the bar's going. But, each lift has its own approach. So I think the main thing is that you need to know how to approach that lift, the correct times to breathe with regards to, do you breathe prior to starting a rep? Do you breathe in on the eccentric? If it's, an isolation exercise, it doesn't really matter as much that you're holding your breath during the eccentric portion, because the load isn't huge. You can inhale at the same time. If you're looking to expand your rib cage on, let's say, a pec fly, you can inhale, expand the rib cage, and get into a nice stretch. But there's not so much load against you that it means you struggle to breathe. With the heavy compounds, you need to create that intra-abdominal pressure to then just be applied, that stability be there, ready for when you want to apply the force. That's going to help you in the lift. And it's more about the bracing element than it is, when you breathe is slightly more subjective, because you can breathe in, you can hold your breath when you actually perform a concentric or the explosive element, or you can breathe out. That's kind of a little bit subjective. Personally, sometimes, depend on the lift, I do both. But the main thing is where you're breathing to, where that air is inhaling into, and what kind of thing that you're going to create from it. Are you aiming to brace? Is that exercise a compound where you need to brace? Is it an isolation where you just need to focus on steady breathing, constant breathing, and kind of repetitive patterns? So I think it depends. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's very underrated when it comes to that. And again, maybe it's us tapping into the kind of the optimal crowd. But if you want to move big weight, you need to know how to lift correctly, which really, really involves the breathing element as well.
Oh, 100%. Like, the same thing could be said about, like, I have new clients, for example, they'll come in the gym and they'll be wearing like some real fashion shoes. I'm like, if there's shoes for bowling where you're taking like maybe a 5-pound ball, best believe there's shoes for, lifting.
Yeah.
But in that case too, like, yeah, it's maybe a bit different, because like oftentimes I'll make them just take their shoes off, and we could use, like, for example, squat ramps or whatever the case is. So that's a little bit different. But as far as like the breathing's concerned, there's guaranteed ways to get more out of your breathing. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. But let's take it back to that squat example, right? So you're going for a personal best. Let's say you're doing like a heavy set of 5 on like a barbell back squat. Like, what's your setup as far as the breathing's concerned, right? So you get tight, you get set up, you're about to unrack the bar. Like, walk us through like a rep.
Okay, so if I'm going to unrack the bar, obviously there's going to be an element of breathing, bracing. You've got to give the bar some tension. So again, it's like a deadlift. You never want to go 0 to 100. You don't want to pick that bar up. A deadlift is not lifting dead weight. It's lifting partially dead weight. You're going to give 20% of resistance before then taking the rest of the load. You don't want to go
slack.
0 to 100. You want to like give 20% and then apply the rest. So it's the same with a squat. If you're going to de-rack the bar from a squat, you're not going to go 0 to 100. You're going to give it a bit of pressure first. You've got to make sure it's in a nice area on the traps. When you're ready and you're up in that position, you feel stable enough and you're nice and braced, you can walk yourself back into that position. Depends. If you've got a mono lift, then great. You don't have to move. Someone's there for you. But it's a commercial gym. We've not got a mono lift. We've not got a person spotting either side. That's just how it is. You know, if we've got a spotter, great. But as long as the safety pins are up, we're good. So once we've stepped back into that position, what I would generally do is, again, maybe it dependent. If there's a mirror in front of me, I can look down at my feet in the mirror. If there's not, I can maybe just about look down. I don't want to compromise my spinal position by doing this to look at where my feet are. If you've got a good experience of squatting, you know roughly where your feet are, give or take. You just got to make sure you feel that you're at the right angle, basically. So as long as you kind of got your toes relatively a good angle, you'll be good. Then from there, you've almost got to start the bracing and breathing process again. You're in that position, you're ready to squat. For myself, I almost exaggerate that breathing. So I'll take a giant deep breath in to the point that I actually shrug the bar up and then lock down and brace. So that's when I'll lock in my lats, get everything nice and fired up, and breathe almost into my stomach, as opposed to bringing the chest nice and full of air. I'll try and get my stomach as full of air as possible, as full of air as I can, just in order to create that intra-abdominal pressure, brace, almost like someone's, getting ready for someone to punch me in the stomach. Then that's when I'll go in for the lift. But it's all about the bracing, those kind of movements. It will be breathe, hold that breath, lock everything in, then go in for the squat. I think the main thing a mistake that a lot of people make is they can breathe and brace, but they're not locked in. So they can breathe and brace. The moment they come down, they'll then lock in at the bottom, and then the bar will pull themselves down and create more resistance going down. If you lock everything before you've started the lift, you are 100% ready to go down and project yourself back up. If you miss one of these key factors, that rep's going to be a hell of a lot harder. And we all go through that stage where if you're going to do a heavy set of 5, number 3 or number 4, you might end up screwing it up. And then you have to take a little bit longer between reps. You have to reset yourself and then go in for number 5. And it might even be easier. It just depends. Sometimes you can fall out of groove, but as long as you set yourself up, it's proper preparation prevents poor performance at the end of the day. If you get all of those bases covered, you've got as many of those little kind of miniature checkpoints you've got in your mind. Tick all those things off. If one of them goes to shit, you can reapply it on the next rep. But try and get all those little checkpoints done before you start the lift, because if you're trying to correct things during the lift, the likeliness is you're either going to fail or it's going to be a really, really hard rep. And then from there, the likeliness of you getting to the end of that set is going to be a hell of a lot less than if you were prepared every rep to go through those steps.
Right. I find the deeper I get into the lifting, the more I realize that when you observe a lifter, the cues or what's going on as their preparatory work for the lift, it takes a more experienced eye to catch on to the subtle cues. You understand what I'm saying? So like, give you an example, like for bench, obviously it's pretty amateur if you're tap dancing on a bench. It's not doing you any favors. So one cue that I got from shout out to Big Benches YouTube channel, he says when your glutes are on the bench, pretend that there's a scale on the bench and you want that scale to read 0. So your bum is not relaxed on the bench. It's just like the fabric of the shorts. You understand? So yeah. It's just on enough. Like the bum is making contact with the bench, but it's not relaxed. And while the glutes are squeezed, with just the right amount of, it's just a slight bit, you get perfect like lower body stability.
Yeah.
So no tap, but to the naked eye, to somebody watching, they'll never be able to pick that up. They might just think the glutes are just relaxed on the bench.
Yeah.
And I feel like breathing kind of falls into a similar category. Like most people looking at people lifting, they're not thinking, oh, wow, well, he excelled at this part of the lift. They're just thinking like, okay, well, they're not even thinking about the breathing. They're just taking it for granted. But like, meanwhile, that person had like thousands of repetitions where they're really just trying to nail down the breathing. And like what you said, it's not about when you're breathing, but it's also where you're breathing too. So like the context of that. Yeah. So, and that, but these are like more complex things. And what bothers me is when people, they try to downplay, like they just make it sound like it's so simple. Like obviously I'm breathing. And oftentimes some of these people are pretty strong too. The people who say that, it's not just like weak individuals. But the thing is, like, they could be stronger if they apply these approaches,
Yeah, and I get it all the time. It sounds really bad. Like if I had $1 for every time someone commented on an Instagram post where I'm doing a lift and they say he's holding his breath, or they say you shouldn't hold your breath. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes I don't respond because I'm like, do I really have to explain this again and again and again? But sometimes I'll just explain. I'm like, look, if you saw my approach, because dependent on the angle that this exercise is filmed, it could look like I'm genuinely holding my breath for the whole set. But generally speaking, my breathing pattern, whatever it is for any set, it may be different depending on the exercise, but it is constant, it is consistent, and you can guarantee that every rep, I'm not holding my breath for half a set. If I'm doing a set of squats, I'm breathing every rep. But all they'll see, and again, it comes down to context, doesn't it? If people don't quite see the full picture, if they don't understand the full context, people will jump on that and go, you should be breathing. That's not good. You're doing it wrong. Well, actually, I'm doing it right. I'm a lot more experienced than you think I am. And, in a way, sometimes it's like, I don't need to explain myself to you. But then it's kind of, right, okay, put your coach hat on, explain to them what you're actually doing, and they might understand. Usually the response I would get would be like, no, you're still doing it wrong. Okay, cool, fine, whatever. But at the end of the day, I think, even us posting our lifts, it can look impressive and stuff on social media, but it's just a small bit of the picture, because the context around it, even if we post the approach along with the lift itself, if we were to put a PR of us hitting a PR of a squat, that video would be like 2 minutes long for one rep, because the approach, how we walk back into the squat, how we approach that set in general, our breathing, everything, how we start, how we go through the lift, how we finish, how we walk it back into the rack. But even then, they can't see what we're doing at the time. They can't see the way that we're breathing. They can't see what we're bracing exactly. So the context of what we post is always still very small in comparison to what's actually going on. So it's like you said, people can't see everything that's going on, and only the more experienced people can identify those little things in a way.
Yeah, and only the people who are watching from afar, there's only a select few who are actually going to start even applying it too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So it's funny stuff, man. But transitioning from that, actually, with this is a pretty controversial one right here. And I understand too, before I even get into it, that there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's not the way, it's just a way. And with belts. So for example, you got a lot of coaches, man, not even gonna name all of them, but you got a lot who say, look, especially on the bodybuilding side, who say, if you want thick erectors, it's beltless hinges, man. And you got other lifters, and both definitely have valid points. So I'm not even taking a side, actually. And even though right now I'm not really doing beltless work, but I always think, like, man, like, should I be doing more belt work, But and I see other lifters, like guys like Keefe, for example, and like he swears by a belt from what I've seen, He's even made certain posts saying, like, look, if you don't wear a belt, man, like, and he goes into his reasons,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about the belt?
I'm pretty. Now, I used to be anti everything, right? Anti assistance in any way, shape, or form. So, like, for example, when it comes to like wrist wraps for stuff, so if I'm as in lifting straps, I don't use lifting straps out of personal preference. Every now and again, if it's a set that's going to be super hard, I'll use some like Versa grips that are going to assist with my grip. But I'm one of those people that's kind of like, I really used to be a purist of do everything raw. So no belts, no straps, no wraps, no sleeves, no nothing, right? But as time goes on, again, it's one of those things, you're a young, new, naive coach. You see the application of everything. everything has its place. So I believe belts would definitely have their place. I can see why. I always used to think, okay, belts are for a specific type of people that need them because they have, they have other issues that need to be dealt with. They have weaknesses. They have issues they've developed over time that means they need that extra support. But from a powerlifting standpoint, in more recent years, I see the application. I see the benefit it adds to it. Personally, myself, I'm just a bit of a diehard kind of raw lifter. So I've never ever used a belt, and then every time I've tried and considered, it's felt so strange and it's felt so hard to get used to that I just go, do you know what? That's not the weak point of my lift. If it was the weakest point of my lift, then I would work. I kind of go by the principle that you're only strong as your weakest link. If that is the place where your form is breaking down, if that is the part of the lift where you feel the most weak or the least stable, it needs to be addressed. For the guys that are massive advocates of belts and say it should be worn for practically everything, again, it's one of those. It's like I said. It's like I said before. You've got guys that are one end of the spectrum that are like anti this, that, and the other. They're like purists of, which is what I used to be, very much a purist of, like no equipment, no gear, whatever. Then you get the guys at the opposite end of the spectrum, and you kind of, again, you just need to be in the middle. You need to see the application and trust what it's going to be doing, and you need to try it out for yourself. But then equally so, everything has its place, but it shouldn't be used for absolutely everything. So if you feel more stable in a squat, and especially just from even as a placebo, if you don't feel more stable, but it makes you more confident to be able to squat more weight, that in itself shows that using a belt has a benefit to you, even if it's just from a mental standpoint. But equally so, if you can, if people are forcing, they're saying you should wear a belt because it makes you more stable, and you don't actually feel that it makes your technique worse because you're focusing on other things that shouldn't be focused on, then you may need to use it. I think it's one of these things where you've got to, again, like we said before, I always use the analogy of, like, take it with a pinch of salt. Everything should be taken with a pinch of salt. If you approach something with an open mind, just go, okay, do you know what? I understand the application. I might try it for myself. Try it for yourself. Don't buy a lifting belt that's like hundreds of dollars, but get a lifting belt, try it for yourself, see if that bracing benefits you. If after a few weeks you actually see that it's starting to benefit you because you're able to get more power through the floor, generate that into a squat, and then ultimately lift more weight, there's going to be a benefit to be had. But then on the flip side, if you are completely naive to it, but in actual fact your midsection and bracing is actually a real big problem with your squat, you kind of need to be open to the idea of it. So, as long as the application is there, I just think they're always, it's the same with anything in fitness. There are always two extremes, and there are a select few people that are in the middle. As long as you see the application, make your own decision, but it's not necessarily for everyone. I see the benefits for most people. I even see the benefits for myself, but at the same time, it's not the weak point of my lift. It's not what I need to focus on most.
So, I find that what bothers me about, and by the way, I used to had so many different phases, man, but I had a point, man, where I was using straps on everything, man.
Yeah.
And wrist straps as well, and like a lot of any press or anything, tricep extension, like I would have the wrist straps, just keep them on the whole workout, just I would untighten them between sets, whatever. But there were times with the straps in particular, man, where my grip was getting so weak, man. If it wasn't a warm-up set, I would have the straps on for the most part. And like now being more in the gray zone, if I'm doing, for example, like dumbbell split squats, I'm like, you know what? Let me just get my grip a little stronger, Yeah. I don't need them. Or like specific certain back lifts, like, you know what? I don't even need them. But as far as like going back to the belt, for instance, what bothers me is you have some people who have piss poor technique on like a hinge, for example, and then they throw a belt on, and it's like, okay, well, you probably have a really weak core, and the belt, you might even get some more weight out of it because it's like you have an extra reference for your midsection to push into, but now you're just a guy who's lifting a bit more with even worse form.
Yeah.
So it's
and
like
it's
now,
but it's, isn't it?
Pardon, I missed that.
So it's false confidence, isn't it? In a way, you know, it gives that, and it's like, yeah, great. You can put you've kind of got to the point where, okay, I've added a belt, I can put more load on the bar, but that load's not going in the right direction anyway. Where that load is going on your body is wrong in the first place. If the load is going straight onto your erectors, wearing a belt isn't going to really take much of that load away, because if your glutes are weak, you've got no leg drive, the quads aren't being active, and you're looking to do a conventional deadlift, and you've got, you know, your lower back is your weak point, again, it's still not, it's not right. You're taking away from the things you really want to work on. You're basically, it's like, you know, it's like pissing in the wind in theory. You're putting a band-aid over an open wound that is just much bigger than that small thing. You know, but again, it's a mistake that I think everyone's got to make to an extent, because if you've got the open mind to approach things that way, but you've got to really delve deep and just think about whether that's actually benefiting you when you're doing it, because, you know, they will come to a point where they'll just go, oh, well, I'm not getting any stronger and my back's starting to hurt even though I wear a belt. Why do you think that is? It's because you've not strengthened anything. And the ego comes into play, of course. You've not dialed it back. You've not focused on your form. You just thought a belt will help me lift more, not my muscles and developing my muscles will help me lift more. No, the belt will help me do it. Well, the belt doesn't help you in any other element of life, is it?
Had people, for example, if my back hurts, I should use a belt, huh? Like, do you do, for example, you do any like oblique work, train your core directly? Like, nah. And to me, the word technique, it's kind of vague. It's like, okay, technique what? Like, I like to look at it in phases. Like, I like to look at, for example, setup, right? The setup is before the weight even moves, right? And then then like midway technique is like when you're actually doing the lift. But like if your setup is piss poor, like before you even started the lift, it's already a catastrophe, you know? So, you know what I'm saying? So you can't even set up properly. Let's just say you have 600 pounds on the bar and you're not even lifting it, but even the position you just get into is crap. There's no way you're going to be able to budget.
That's it. Yeah. And one of my favorite things with that is that I remember I used to watch, like, you know, back growing up, and I'm sure you were the same, you used to watch like Strongman and stuff like that. And like one of my favorite of all time strongmen was Mariusz Pudzianowski. And they asked him once, and they were like, oh, you're the only guy that's on the circuit currently in this competition that's not wearing a belt. And he said, I make my own. And that was it. And that's
same way KK. Remember KK?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. And it's because it's something that stuck with me, through my whole lifting career, so to speak, is that I'll always think back to that. And it's because ultimately, you know, he understood why everyone else did it, but he was on the other end of the spectrum. He just went, look, I make my own. And I thought, well, it's not, oh no, I'm fine, I don't need a belt. It was, I make my own. I do what's required in order to not need a belt. So of course a belt is still going to have its place, but if you're focusing on, you know, that kind of short-term, instant, you know, a little bit of strength every time, trying to progressively overload every week, but you're not actually focusing on what's deep down happening with those kind of those key accessory work that you should be doing. If you're not focusing on any of that, in the long term, even if you get strong as shit, you're probably going to be riddled with injuries by the time you start to dial it back. And, you know, it's, at the end of the day, it's accessory work, it's prehab, it's injury prevention. That's part of the reason why we do it. Yes, we want to optimize our lifts, but at the same time, we want to be lifting when we're old. We don't want to be unfortunate enough to need surgery for any reason. We don't want to be in the same situation as, I don't want to use Ronnie Coleman as an example again, because again, I can't squat 800 pounds, but we don't want to be in that situation, because I guarantee he probably wouldn't be in the same situation if he had more elements of prehab within his routine. If he had other elements other than the fact that he was a genetic freak and he just lifted so raw with such intensity, but almost a lack of education in a way. But then arguably you could say on the opposite end of on the opposite side, you could play devil's advocate and say, well, if he spent all his time doing prehab, he wouldn't have been 8-time Mr. Olympia. He wouldn't have been training as intensely, or he wouldn't have been doing the things that he did if he cared more about longevity. So that, there's always going to be that argument, of course.
That's the funny thing about Ronnie. Like, people will say, for example, or not even just Ronnie, just strong lifters in general who are like obviously older, it's if they were beltless the whole time, it's like, and let's just say you got two twins, they're both in pain, but they've been lifting like hardcore big bodybuilders, and like, they're in wheelchairs, whatever the case is, or they're just really like they have very restricted movement options, they're not doing too well. One camp will be like, well, see what happens when you don't wear a belt. Then the other camp will be like, we'll see, you understand? It's like, if you're beltless or not, people are still going to they're just going to be like, okay, well, you should have used the belt, or he should have not used the belt, because the belt was basically, it was loading his spine with extra weight.
Yeah.
So either way, the lifter's going to get shit because, because it's hurt.
Ronnie wore a belt as well. So when he was deadlift, I'm pretty sure he wore a belt when he was squatting, stuff like that. So like, it didn't matter. There's always going to be people on one side of they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, that's the reason he's in a wheelchair. And then there's going to be people on the other side of the spectrum that just go, yeah, but he would have never been 8-time Mr. Olympia. And it's like, well, but no one is Ronnie. No one knows how he got, everyone knows how he got to where he is. He was a genetic freak at the end of the day. And aside from, all the PEDs and stuff like that, there's nothing to say. If he were to complain, if you were to train completely optimally, he may not be in the same situation that he was. He may not have been 8-time Mr. Olympia if he trained optimally, because the way that he trained, he responded very, very well to. And there's nothing to say, there's no research to support that if he trained what is now deemed as optimally, that he would have been in the same situation. There is literally nothing to support that. You could say on paper that his form was completely dog shit, but it worked for him. And even though it put him at risk, you could say, okay, well, mechanically it put him at risk of a lot of things. It still worked.
Well, you could make the argument about any sport though. Like,
of course,
a lot of, for example, like arm wrestlers, kind of random. Like, a lot of them say like, we only got one good arm left.
Yeah.
So like we could only do events where we could only do the right arm.
Yeah.
At that level, it's just like there's just so much wear and tear, and at such a high competition, or with such a high training age, you have some mileage as well.
Yeah.
And people are obviously abusing compounds and stuff like that.
And I always say, it's the same in any sport. If you want to make it to the elite level of any sport, it is not healthy.
Yeah, live by the sword, die by the sword. There's going to be,
because it has to be taken to another extreme. Whether it's bodybuilding with the enhanced side of things, whether it's American football, whether it's soccer, whether it's whatever, you have to take what is actually a healthy activity and a hobby and a pastime for a lot of people. You have to take it to an extreme to make it to that professional level. That's just how it is. That is competitive sport. There's nothing healthy about elite level sport at the end of the day.
Yeah, especially like other sports, take soccer and football. It's like, these are a business at the end of the day too, so like people are betting a lot of money on these games. Yeah. It's not just for fun anymore, and it's not even just to support your family. It's also like you want to support, you want to do well, you want to give the reputation to your country, you're the best in the world. It's like people are gonna use everything they can to their you understand what I'm saying, to the best of their ability to get that edge.
Yeah.
And there will be sacrifices that have to be made, and a lot of those sacrifices are gonna have to deal with them later on down the line.
Yeah.
And they're willing to accept them too. So
yeah, it's like American footballers with the concussion and things like that. There's a lot of issues that come into play later on in life. And you could say tennis players, you've got Nadal's coming back on the circuit next year, but he's had no end of injuries because he's at the back end of his career. Federer, again, it's injury that ends their careers slightly earlier than they wanted to, and it's only it's only a matter of time with a lot of these. If a lot of guys retire and they've not had any major injuries, that's an extremely successful career. But then it probably battles the question in their minds of, could they have been better because they didn't experience certain injuries, because they didn't push themselves as hard as they physically could. So I think, anything, if you want to do well in it, it's going to take an extreme level of commitment and almost a willingness to accept the repercussions, whether it's a healthy non-assisted sport or whether it's an assisted sport like bodybuilding or elite level powerlifting and stuff like that. You've got to accept that there will be, even if there's no physical repercussions, there may be neurological things that come into play if you've used certain type of compounds. There's a lot of stuff, whether it's deterioration of joints, not necessarily bones, but if it's muscular, like the stuff that they can come out with is huge. But you've just got to accept the risk. It's elite level sport, it's professional sport, and it's healthy to the point that it has to become unhealthy, because it's an unhealthy obsession that you have to make it to the top.
And even if, let's say, you are taking it the healthy route, there's bound to be some competitors who are willing to take it up a notch and say, okay, that's the bar that you're setting. We're gonna take it unhealthier, We're gonna take more stuff than you, and
it pressurizes you to then think, okay, I can either crash and burn and I could not make anything out of this, or I've got to commit to it. And I see a lot of guys in competitive bodybuilding, and now is especially in the natural leagues, that they'll do a show as a teenager, which they'll be 18, 19 years old. I think 19 is as old as you can go to be in teens. Then you go into juniors up until like 23. And a lot of guys that are doing teens they'll compete for a season or two, and then they'll be like, I think I've got the potential to make it to the Mr. Olympia, and they'll jump on the gear at 19. And it's great that they've got that aspiration, but at the same time, there's so much potential that they could have achieved naturally before going down that route. But they also think, part of it's social media. They see the guys that are up there at the classic physique. You look at Chris Bumstead, he's a year younger than me. He's 29. I think he's 29, 28, 29. And, he's substantially bigger than me, but he also looks about 10 years my elder. And because he achieved the Olympia at such a young age, and the guys that are now within the top 3, top 4 are so young, guys that are in the natural league see that on social media and they go, I need to start as soon as possible. But they don't even know their true potential before they start. They just go, this is a goal that I want to get to. These guys achieved it at this age, and this is where I need to go right now. I can't afford to wait. And don't get me wrong, I'm 30 years old. In theory, if I hopped on the sauce for like 3-4 years, I could probably be, maybe if my genetics allowed it, I could be the size of the guys that are on the Olympia stage. Doesn't mean I'd make it to the Olympia stage, though. Doesn't mean I do well. Don't for a second think that I consider myself to have that genetic potential. But at the same time, I don't think if I were to do it in the next few years, I've still got time. I'm 30 years old. I could make it to the Olympia stage if I had the genetic capability in 5 years' time. And that's not too late. But the guys that are 18, 19, that are jumping to conclusions, it's great that they're chasing their dreams so quickly, but they've not yet even discovered their potential.
No. So I know that we both have our time constraints. To everybody who's been watching up to this point, man, like, you guys are the real MVPs. In the next episode, man, we got a part 2 coming in the near future. If you guys want to add questions in the comment section below, feel free to do so. But basically, we tackled on some social media stuff, some coaching stuff for the personal trainers watching, along with some training stuff. And we went a little bit into the natty or not stuff, but overall, that's what you guys got from part 1 of this Q&A. Next Q&A, we'll go into more side effects of drugs, along with a lot of nutrition questions, man. So you guys don't want to miss that. If you're not following Ryan on IG, drop what you're doing, do it right now. And it provides a ton of value, man. I'm a well-respected coach in the UK, and I'm really happy to have him on the channel, man. So you got any final thoughts or?
No, I appreciate your time, man. No, obviously, yeah, we've got our time constraints and stuff, but I'm definitely looking forward to the next one. We'll try and get something in next week, and then we can definitely look to get some tap into the natty or not kind of side of things, and definitely get into some nutrition related questions as well. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go down some deep rabbit holes, man. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, same.
All right, in a bit.
All right, take it easy.